I mean, you talk about Herb Alpert. That's that's interesting because just to the whole A&M thing, I actually managed the Otis Redding estate. I managed Bow Wow. Kenny Lattimore, we just dropped the album on him last week. Um, like I told you, I got something called Scream Star Entertainment, which is we do a tour. It's been going on since all of the new millennium. Started in 2001. It's called the Scream Tour, and it's basically an arena-sized tour dealing with mostly urban hip hop, young R&B acts. So pretty much anybody from Chris Brown to Sierra to Neo, obviously the Bow Wow, B2K in a day. Last year on tour we had T.I., Sierra, T-Pain, Lloyd, and then we had special guests throughout the tour. Jigga, 50 Cent did several of the dates. Diddy did some dates. Wyclef Jean showed up a couple of times. Um, Kanye West showed up in Chicago. No, Kanye showed up in New York and Chicago. Um, Nelly showed up in St. Louis. So it's one of those tours that's really became kind of the fabric of young urban America. And so about a year and a half ago, I did a joint venture relationship, and really it just got announced. A joint venture relationship with Warner Music and Atlantic Records. So now they are my joint venture partners on Scream Star Entertainment. We just signed our first artist. His name is Malik. He's 16. Signed through Wyclef Jean's company, and called Carnival House. So we're doing a lot of stuff, doing lots of stuff. And and I ran Columbia Records. I mean, I signed Destiny's Child. I signed um, Alicia Keys. Discovered Alicia when she was 16. Um, Handled the Fugees. She went to a performing arts school there in Hell's Kitchen, right outside of Hell, right there in heart of Manhattan. I gave her her first deal, like I said, at 16 when I was president of Columbia. So she was signed first to Columbia. I left in '99. Yeah, I left in that must be somebody's page, but I left in '99, and then later in '99, believe it or not, Columbia let her leave because we had not released her. I signed her in '96, I guess. So in '99, so she was there about 2.5 years, and just developing, letting her write and do what she does now. But unfortunately, the powers to be at the time after I left didn't necessarily see it that same way. But then she went and crossed the street, as we say, and got hooked up with Clive Davis and ended up doing her own thing. Probably, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 of the songs that was on her album when she came out, finally did come out, was all part of the album that we were making in 1998. And they let her take the music and everything. And that's a real history story right there. But signing Destiny's Child and obviously Jermaine, my relationship was with Columbia Records was pretty strong in the '90s because again I ran So So Def with Jermaine, and we had the Brat and we had Jagged Edge and we had Escape, and we were just developing a brand in So So Def, and and through doing that, and then obviously I had a whole lot of relationships with other artists, and and I was pretty darn good at what I did. So the heads of Columbia and Sony at the time decided they wanted to bring me up, and my management company at that time was based in Miami. So I went and kind of did my thing up in New York for about 4 years. The Fugees' first album was called Blunted on Reality, and very few people, I don't know, they sold 50,000. They'll get down. So they didn't sell a lot of records, and then obviously then The Score was next. And when I went to Columbia, it was in July of '95, and they pretty much, and I can't take credit for the record or anything they did because they pretty much had the record done. The only thing that I can say is that I convinced them to let's wait and set the record up right. And we did that. And it was, if I'm not mistaken, in October of '95, we put out a song called Fujila, which created that buzz, really kind of took off, and we released that album at the beginning of '96, and the rest is history. And it just, went on to sell phenomenal sales, which I've got it somewhere around here, but maybe in my office back there. But they sold a lot of records. Basically, there were almost 20 million records worldwide. 19, I think it was 19 million. Yeah. I mean, they were phenomenal. All over the world, not just in the U.S. And the fact that Wyclef speaks French and Spanish, and his, being from Haiti, and his just ability to, I mean, it's amazing. So they became an international brand right away, and it was fun. It was fun. Maxwell. I put out Maxwell, and here he comes now. He ain't released an album in a while. And now he's out on tour and selling, and it's so crazy because I realized during that era how important, or I guess how important my existence was, and still is, I hope, but how important it was for the music industry back then, because maybe this will be a little vain, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where would Destiny Child, if I hadn't, hadn't been there. Or, don't get me wrong, talented, Beyonce, their sisters, Matthew, her dad, they all got it going on, and they've went on to do what they've had to do. But that launch is always critical. Now, it would have happened eventually. Or Alicia, when you really think about it, how it all transpired for her to be, look at those sales right there, to realize, Alicia Keys, I think the album that she's on now is her 4th album. So it ain't like, you think about it, like we were talking about Bow doing 7 records, you just don't. There's a lot that goes into this. Or even Kenny Lattimore, to this day, I managed him, but I launched him in '96 with Maxwell and some of these other artists, again, as he was signed to Columbia Records at that time. So, it's just a lot of history, man. And for me, I've actually been a part of the fabric. It's interesting in a big way, probably much more than most people really realize. It's basically the involvement. I mean, the involvement is being just that. It's now about it is about branding. It's about the ability to. Obviously the internet's came on and made a huge difference, but hip hop has become a culture. So it makes it a little different. It's not just about rap music. Like rock and roll really was a culture. I'm rock and roll. That used to be the tag when I was growing up. It wasn't even about, you could listen to rock and roll music, but if you were rock and roll, you were rock and roll. It was even before the punk rockers, or before it was just straight ahead rock, and rock had a broad genre. Even in the early days of, looking up at Otis Redding, in the early days of those cats, it was called R&B, but they didn't. The R was something that was created, by some people over at Atlantic Records. That's rhythm. It was blues to those guys. So it wasn't, it wasn't about. So everybody did what they did. Everybody, they made blues. You couldn't tell. I don't know, how would you label the Beatles? I would guarantee most people thought they were probably just a young rock pop. And back then, pop. Beatles did make it pop. So you know what I'm saying, when you put labels on it. And I think with rap, which is what it was, and rap kind of became hip hop, and people referred to hip hop as rap. But then the way we wear clothes, the swag, the bagginess, the lifestyle, it became just that. And so as it became a lifestyle, as it became a culture, then you have to market that culture, and then that culture became the parties, and it became the bling, as they say. Everything started being raised in size and in volume, and you started seeing ads in magazines all of a sudden that looked like they were glowing and shining versus just flat, stuff. And I think all of that has played in. So, I've always referred to Jermaine and Diddy and some of the others as marketeers, because that's what they do. They grew up in the game. They grew up around the game. They've watched cats like myself, Andre Harrell, Russell Simmons, a few others in that world to make moves, and L.A. Reid and those guys in a different kind of way. But they've watched all these folks, and it was always about, I'm out to do them. I'm sure Jermaine, he probably would never admit it, but deep down, I'm gonna blitz my dad. He ain't even on the map compared to what I'm gonna do. I'm sure at some point that probably crossed his mind, but it was all good. I think you got to leave tracks and leave things so people can follow, and hopefully they can excel and surpass what you've done. So that's why, even for me, man, I feel very proud of Jermaine. I'm proud to meet myself, and then a lot of these young artists, most of them call me Pops, just because they've been around a long time, they know, most people that would hear that, though, just thinks it's just a reverent term, and even they used to think that with me and Jermaine, as he said, oh, I'm going to talk to my dad about this. They thought it was just a reference. Bow Wow almost calls Jermaine like his pops and dad, but he ain't really. But we had a real, and most people, again, they just thought I managed Jermaine because, Mauldin, Dupree, they wasn't really putting it together. So when you just asked me about marketing, we spend a lot of time, energy, effort on marketing and setting up things and doing them the way we need to do them. So all of a sudden, if I say, oh, I'm setting up for this, and I got this date, and I'm going to back it out here, believe me, there's a plan. So if all of a sudden someone says, oh, here's Bow's album out, and it's a month ahead of time, well, my plan just went to be honest with you. So I've got to now figure out, okay, now how do I regroup? It's no different than anything else. So yeah, no, that would be my biggest dismay. It's not so much about, because nowadays, particularly in hip hop, music burns so fast. So we have a game plan for Bow now in my mind that carries him all the way into the summertime based on touring and everything else. If the album leaks, then that throws that off a little. We try to come up with plans and alternate plans that could help, but that probably would upset the cart a little bit. Yeah. I wouldn't want that to happen, but there are songs that we're putting out ourselves right now. We're leaking to some degree individual songs for the album, and they ain't really for the album. They're songs that was being originally recorded with the album in mind. So we're now putting those songs out there, and just to be ahead of time, but that's all part of promotion. I look at Bow as a multifaceted entertainer. A superstar, a real star talent. I mean, if he walked in this room right now, that camera would probably just move on its own and look at him. I mean, I'm serious. That's the kind of, some cats got it like that, and some girls have it like that, and you can. That's what it is. When you think about the stage, looking up to people, there's a few artists, there's a few people that really carry that, and that's what I look for in looking for talent. It ain't always. I get a bunch of tapes, a bunch of pictures, and a bunch of blogs, and a bunch of this and a bunch of that, but they ain't all stars. Yeah. Bow Wow's a star, bona fide star. But yes, do you look at him? 100%. He don't sing. He's a hip hop rap artist that happened to start when he was a kid. So a lot of people minimize that because he was a kid rap artist. But we always kept him on the edge. I mean, and he's always been edgy. I mean, if you think about it, Snoop Dogg is the one that really discovered Bow. In that discovery, Bow was in some of them early Snoop Dogg videos, which a lot of people don't know. And Bow was at, oh my gosh, yeah, Bow was like 8 years old or 6 years old in one. And Snoop, he's standing in the corner and talks in one of the videos. I don't even want to tell y'all what he said, but everybody's gonna want to go look. But it's a little explicit. But that was him because obviously who he was around, that whole Snoop Death Row thing. And Snoop, to his credit, he felt like that he needed to do something that what Bow needed, he couldn't give Bow, and in their world. And so Snoop got in touch with Jermaine, and because he knew of the crisscross element, and Snoop and Jermaine knew, and he felt as far as Jermaine's guidance, beat-wise, and the type of music that a young artist needed, but still try to keep credibility, and he was absolutely right. So Bow was a total setup project. We set it up, and obviously his first single was called Bounce With Me. It was youthful and whatever, but it was real, and most people credited Bow, most prominent artists credited him like, oh, this kid's got skills. I mean, he really, and still to this day, it's just that, like I said, people look at him because they look at him as a teen bopper, but now Bow is 21 years old, and he's going to change the face. It's kind of like Will Smith or whatever. We feel that he has the abilities in a couple of movies. He's got this movie coming out with Forrest Whitaker and Lil Wayne. It comes out on Christmas Day, called Hurricane Season, and it's about a basketball team, during the hurricane of New Orleans that, was an issue. So they doing that, and then he's got 5 more episodes of Entourage. He's been co-starring in Entourage this season, and got a new record that comes out which is that 7th album I was telling you about. It comes out in December. And then we got a whole bunch of other stuff launched for him. So at 21 years old, yeah, he is the young prince in our minds as far as what he's doing. Kind of a combination. Some of it's reference. Some of it is, you have a real game plan. But 9 times out of 10, those game plans, it's all about building those relationships, because usually corporate America or those companies need so much more longer lead time. We'll go in the studio tonight and come out with a hit and be talking about, we're going to put this record out in 3-4 weeks, corporate America doesn't work like that. So typically they want at least a 6-month kind of window or something to really build. So that makes it real hard. But not, at the end of the day, and corporate America is getting more involved. I know earlier you were asking me about the tag situation. I mean, that's a real history-making kind of thing with Procter & Gamble that Jermaine's been able to do. But they were smart in the aspects of finding, because they're creating a label, which ultimately will have music artists associated with, and you can almost just see if there's artists that Jermaine's doing and they become big, then all of a sudden Procter & Gamble will probably use those artists as a real ploy or a way of positioning them even further into the marketplace, the hip-hop marketplace. And I think you'll see, and more companies are doing it now anyway, but you will probably start to see it being more and more in that same kind of vein, because they've got the dollars and cents, whereas the record business is kind of dwindling a little. So we don't have as much money in the game anymore to market and stuff like we did back when I used to run Columbia Records. Yeah. Part of my success wasn't that we wasted money either, but we just spent it in the right way. And, we had it to spend, so that made a big difference. I think they're on it. I think that the turntable thing, that used to be the music. That was the music bed. That was the instrumentalists. They wasn't when Jam Master Jay, God rest his soul, was on tape, you couldn't told him he wasn't a band. I mean, if you go ahead and think about the Aerosmith Run DMC, come together piece, that's what that was all about. And no doubt. So I'm just saying, at the end of the day, it's part of it. So now harmonics particularly, all they've done is recognize, the aspects of where things are going. And there's a couple of projects that we're talking to them about that expands the game a little bit, because typically it's been rock music and you hadn't really seen a lot of other stuff. But I think now that they've created their platform and have launched the game overseas, which was a whole nother thing that wasn't done earlier in the year. But no, there's no doubt about it. It's very prominent and very, very powerful. Just make sure you're hot. Test it with some friends and stuff before you send it to me. Because, hey, listen, we only got so much time, and I got to be honest with you. If it ain't bumping and marketed or already or pre-set up or come to me by, someone else suggesting it, it could be the hottest stuff in the world, because to be honest, I tell people all the time, when I discovered the whole Arrested Development thing, the whole Arrested Development piece, it's so funny to me, because I used to tell speech all the time. A friend of theirs who used to be a dancer for a young girl that I represented, Angie, this was in the late 80s, sent me an album that Speech had already printed up, right? And it was independent, and they were trying to do it. I must have had the album sitting on my desk in Miami for months. And one night, I was there just late, sitting back, doing stuff. I said, man, let me put this right. It'd been sitting right there because I swore I was going to get to it. And I put it on. I said an album. It was a 12-inch whatever. And I put it on, and I was literally blown away. I really was. I was literally blown away with what I heard. So that being the case, I immediately reached out to those guys. But it took, my point of bringing that up, that was then. And I was really, even though I was managing and representing artists, I was hungry. I was anxious to do that. And it still took me a whole lot of time to try to get myself wrapped around it, or, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of times it's has brought in. I mean, I get tapes, man, Federal Express, delivered with a singing telegram. I mean, you get all kinds of stuff for people to want to pay attention. And I say, that's me. I can't imagine what Jermaine and all of them get. And they don't really take music anymore unsolicited, because now in the climate that we're living in, people be like, well, I sent you that song and somebody signed for it 2 weeks ago. Now I hear it on V103. Get out of here, But, so you kind of have to look out for that too. So we all are a little more cautious. But again, it's about building. And I think you look at this kid, Soulja Boy, who took the internet and really made a career out for himself. And there were some people here that in Atlanta that was smart enough to look on, and their kids is the one that told them about it. So they went online, peeped it, went and signed him, and again, rest is history, because all of a sudden he had popular demand, and So all that, you talk about Guitar Hero, you talk about marketing, it's just the time that we live in, man. It's so critical to be ahead of the game. And the only way you can be ahead of the game is now to really understand everything that's going on around you. If they're serious about it, I think you should make sure that I really don't, because I think that music is about the art. And if you start to put business before the art, I think it gets all screwed up. And there's a lot of folks, trust me, it's good to know where to take your music. It's good to read all the books and have all the understanding. But I would tell you straight out, I didn't, Jermaine probably didn't, half the artists that we know that has made millions of dollars and sold millions of records probably didn't really have a book education on, oh, let me license this and let me do that. What they did do once they started, though, they found the right people around them to help make sure that they did that. And don't get me wrong, I think it's good to understand it. It's good to have a cousin or a friend or somebody that may even understand a little better than you. And nowadays it's easy to understand because of the internet. Everybody, again, you can quickly Google something and have it, right? You can say a license and boom, there every license you want. Hunting license, whatever it may be. But I think that, the licensing and publishing and royalties and all that, if you've got something to promise, you don't want to be taken for a ride, but I think we all now, there's almost a layman's understanding of what the business is anymore, even though people still misinterpret it and they don't totally understand. But no, I think you can spend too much time working on that and not enough time being creative and find yourself still trying to be creative. Listen, I think it's going to keep evolving. I think it's going to keep. One thing that is happening right now, I think the live presentation is back stronger than ever before. I feel like if you can't really perform, if you walk in here years ago, a rap artist was about freestyling. Walk in and you heard all the battles and stuff like that, right? I think you still got to be able to almost do that. It ain't about going in the booth anymore and spitting 2 lines and breaking and starting all over and spitting 2 lines. Or it ain't about, I think it's about being able to really perform now. So if you think back, as I keep looking at Otis Redding or thinking about those artists of back in the day or the Rolling Stones who were still out working, if you really build a touring base for yourself as a young and people know that you're real, and then you can end up creating the music to go along with that, you'll make sure you got yourself a long-standing career. If you can't perform the songs that you record or do to the point that people say, oh my God, he's dope, it's only going to be no more than what that record sales are right now. And that is just the residuals that we get off of it. You can't get necessary admiration from your talents if it's strictly just the record. You got to be able to deliver it so you can have that kind of personal rapport, I believe. And that's what allows Madonna to still do what she does. That is what allows Aerosmith to record, to perform, or Bruce Springsteen, or Prince, or or Run DMC, as far as that goes, to still be able to perform today, because they deliver typically something that means something over the test of time. So I would suggest that any young artist of any genre of music make sure that they have their real performing live game on. Well, first of all, it's a wide gamut. It's a 360 component. We try not to use it in the music business right now because people just ran it in the ground over the last 2 years. People talk about, we want to have a 360 model. Well, really, 360 has been a manager, because as a manager, you deal with everything from babysitting to working with someone's business manager or accountant, and sometimes being their accountant and sometimes being their banker, to booking gigs and working with the agents. So you kind of covering the whole gamut. So really, when you talk about 360 model, it's about almost management. And then to me, the day-to-day aspects of that 360 model is dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And I say that not being flippant or being funny, it's real, because it's usually the details. You very seldom get patted on the back and says, oh man, Michael, you did a great job. You hardly ever get that from an artist. But just as soon as you screw it up, oh man, you but you just messed up my career right here. What's up with that? Or you just, man, why'd you do it? Very seldom, though, is things are moving smoothly and there's no complaints. Very seldom anybody walking around, and it's just what's expected of you as that manager, and usually the way that you know you're good and the way that you know you belong is when you are still managing that same person or managing somebody else year after year after year. Because if not, believe me, you'd be gone. And I think that's part of it. It's just a matter, and you see so many people come in being the mom, being the dad, being the cousin, being the best friend, being the babysitter, literally, to say all of a sudden, oh man, I like your music, let me be your manager. And you see that a lot of times now. When you talk about licensing and all that before, if you are a manager or you want to be a music executive, now you are the one that needs to go and learn those skills or learn what's behind the scenes, learn what licensing is all about, so that hopefully you can advise and direct and guide the proper kind of way. And and that's pretty much in a nutshell. I grew up being a musician in high school and stuff like that. I always, never knowing that this would be where I landed, but as a drummer playing in a band in high school and traveling around, I was always one to coordinate and booking the gigs. I was always the one that talking to such and such, trying to get the book in, or trying to talk somebody into buying us some equipment or doing something. But I never viewed myself as a manager. And over time, I think the management side of me just kind of came forth. And it's hard to beat experience. And then I've always just believed in doing the very best that I could do, being the best that I could be, and being the best at whatever I did. And I think that in itself allowed me to kind of stay there. Without me telling people I was the best, I just did it. I know you said your father was, in the business. There's pros and cons. We're in the hip-hop game. The hip-hop game is about struggle, if you think about it. Most guys, when you read about it, you don't hear about the dad until we became way successful. But usually most guys in the hip-hop game grew up with a mom. That was mom and dad. They grew up on a struggle, not having a lot. We didn't have a lot, but I was always around for Jermaine. So it was a little different. So I think as he took off in this area, there was always, okay, let me make sure I represent properly. So, it was an interesting dynamic, but I always had his back. I was always looking out, and I think that was cue for him to know that somebody's always there making sure that he was, that he was being taken care of. And he didn't even have to ask, because it was, he was a direct extension of me, and I was going to make sure of that. And then, like I said, most people from the outside looking in thought I just managed him. They didn't even realize, by us not using the same last name, they didn't realize I was his dad. Unless he went with us to the airport or something, he had to show ID. Well, back then we didn't even have to show ID at the airport. So, as Jermaine's father, and this is a good example, if you were working with Jermaine and he was like, man, I don't want to hear that, 9 times out of 10 you step back. As his dad, I can step back, but I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Or you know what I'm saying? Now, don't get me wrong, it's much respect. I mean, Jermaine's a grown man, so we don't go at it like that. We do disagree, and every now and then we have to have our one-on-one conversations, but it's a lot of respect, I think, both ways. And I just feel blessed, like I said, to have him around. But yeah, no, man, it's anytime. It's no different than a marriage or whatever. You have your good days, you have your bad days, and you have times when it feels like it should be all good, but then you remember something that was said last night, and you're like, it just totally screws it back up again. You start all back over. But yeah, you go through it. You go through it. I mean, in a lot of ways, a lot of times it makes it harder. I was just telling somebody, Bow Wow and his mom is doing this. They were on VH1. It's about momagers, and they showed Justin and his mom, and they showed Alicia and her mom, and they, and different ones, Lindsay Lohan and her mom, and and Brittany and her mom, and it was kind of like the momagers and the ones that. But most of the time, these guys really, I mean, this is their mom. So a lot of times, as a father, I have to say that I think we get the short end of the stick sometimes, because particularly for male artists, they tend to want to take care of their mom and cater to mom. Oh, that's dad. He gonna find a way for himself. So so that creates a lot of interesting dynamics in a lot of ways. I think that anybody that represents or manages anybody, or somebody that's picking up the phone calling every day, you're definitely taking on a father figure or a mother figure type of role with them in a lot of ways, because you whether you want to or not, you end up finding out a whole lot more than sometimes you even want to know. You know a lot of the personal business and their financial business and where things are. So you really do. It makes it very easy to do. But a lot of times, like even now, I mean, Jermaine and I, we have projects together. We still do stuff together, but on a day-to-day right now, I don't manage Jermaine. But he does his own thing. He has some other managers that work with him in different areas. But obviously, he's an executive up at Island Def Jam. You don't need nobody to manage him while he's being that executive of Island Def Jam or now even the Tag Records thing. But he has more. He has turned it into, again, like you said, a brand and a piece where now he can take pieces of that and connect those dots. I'm excited about all the stuff we try to do with Scream Star Entertainment. You got to check it out. Scream Star Entertainment, that's what it's all about. Scream Star Records, seriously. Got a kid named Malik. Got a new project I'm starting on that everybody will probably hear about in '09 called Feisty Girl. It's the Feisty Girl Project, but the name of the group is Feisty Girl without the S, just Girl. And, just kind of developing that, man. And then, got a young girl that I'm really excited about out of Philadelphia. Her name is Cindy Nix. She just turned 16. So a lot of the young, new, up-and-coming kind of stuff that way. And then I'm excited about what Bow Wow's doing. I think he is revolutionizing himself as well as the industry. He will be a part of the changing time in the music game. With that crossing, still being, with hip-hop being the foundation, but the ability to do film and TV and be looked at in a very prominent kind of way. I really believe that.